In today's episode, a woman in Indonesia on her way back home from a friend's house is targeted by a man-eating python. As the woman sits down to enjoy nature, the giant snake wraps itself around her and begins to swallow her whole. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying python attack on Farita. Welcome to Final Affliction. Not long ago, we covered a rather disturbing case on this channel about a woman named Watiba who was attacked right in the middle of her vegetable patch by a 20-foot python. This case was a particularly gruesome one, and when the horrific pictures of the housewife's body being cut from the monster's body were released, still wearing her sandals and her red top, it wasn't long before other cases of python attacks all around Indonesia began to come to light. Apparently, monstrously huge pythons are quite the infestation in the country. The thing about pythons is that even though they certainly can reach astronomical sizes, they rarely do. If disease or other predators don't take them out before they reach those geriatric ages, then humans get to them. It's not like they're hard to miss, being that big. But Indonesia has plenty of jungle, caves, mountains, and swampy areas for them to hide. And sometimes they live to very old ages, and with age comes enormous size. As humans extend their villages, cities, and farmlands, it's inevitable that people and the creatures of the forest run into each other more and more. But the pythons are more likely to seek out human settlements than any other predator. And we can blame chickens, ducks, and rats for that. A lot of households in Indonesia still keep a vegetable garden, some chickens and cats and dogs as pets too. Chickens and small dogs make for the perfect-sized meal for a snake, and if pickings are slim, they can always snack on the rats and mice that stick around in the background of every human settlement all over the world. But pythons are different from other snake species in one other way. The venomous kinds of snakes usually just hang out and wait along routes where they know critters pass by, and when one just happens to come across their path, they strike. But pythons don't wait for their prey. They actively seek them out, stalking and striking when the target least expects it. And the bigger they get, the more lethal they become. You don't grow to that size without being a formidable hunter. On the 8th of June this year, 2024, a woman identified only by her first name, Farita, went out to sell chilies. She grew her chilies in her own garden and usually sold them at the corner market once a week. But on that Thursday, Farita was on her way to sell them to a collector. Chili enthusiasts, both culinary and horticulturalists, are willing to pay a pretty penny for rare species of peppers or chilies. The 45-year-old mother of four certainly had a wide variety of chilies that she'd been growing all her life, just like her mother before her. By now, her chilies were well known in the area, and she even sold seeds online to overseas collectors, too. When she told her husband that she was leaving, he fully expected her to be away all afternoon. He knew how passionate his wife got when she started talking about gardening. And with another grower, they were bound to be talking soil pH levels, watering schedules, and whatnot for hours. Once the gardeners got going, they never seemed to get talked out. He agreed to keep the children busy and to get dinner started until she returned. Farita loaded a box full of samples, slung her handbag over her shoulder, and headed out the door. And that's the last Farita's kids or her husband saw her ever again. Farita walked for 3 miles, met up with the collector at his residence, and just like her husband knew she would, the two chatted excitedly all afternoon, exchanged seeds and fresh chilies, and both walked away from the meeting with enough samples to fill more pots than Farita had to spare. She was strolling along the busy main road, her box filled to the brim, and her mind on making space for all of her brand new plant babies and where she was going to place them in her backyard. She turned off to a quieter street away from the shops and into the residential area. Still 4 blocks away from her home, Farita's legs were starting to get tired, so she sat down next to the road where there was a small crop of trees and bush growing wild in between houses. There are many places like this all over Indonesian towns where the jungle meets civilization. Farita just wanted to catch her breath for a few minutes. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Unbeknownst to her, a 16-foot-long python had been searching the tall grasses and ferns just behind Farita's back for something to eat just when she sat down. The snake did not hesitate. The moment her scent and her heat was still for just a second, its body sailed through the air. Using its lower half, it pushed off the ground, essentially flying straight at Farita. The snap of its jaws around her face and its gigantic body wrapping around her happened instantaneously. The speed with which it flew allowed that tail to snap around her like a slinky toy, completely enveloping her upper body. The teeth sank straight through her neck and cheek. Unlike venomous snakes, pythons don't have hollow teeth, and they're just as hard as any predator's teeth. Those fangs went in so hard that they splintered several of Farita's teeth, and its lower jaw severed her ear, sinking in just below her skull and into the neck. She had no chance. One moment she was sitting down, relaxing, and the next her entire body was entwined in a force that was so crushing and all-consuming that even if half her face wasn't engulfed in those massive jaws, there would not have been any air in her lungs to expel a scream. Nor could she put up a fight, not with her arms pinned so securely to her sides. And then the already crushing coils began to tighten even more. Tighter and tighter its serpentine body contracted, and deeper went its fangs, tearing her cheek clean off the bone. The cracking sounds that were coming from her ribs, breaking one by one, sounded like firecrackers. The bone collapsed into her lungs, shredding them. Her eyes began to pop out of their sockets from the pressure, and her hips were so jammed together that she could feel them grinding into each other, sending vibrations through her spine. The pain would have been so extreme that Farita probably passed out from the agony. Through its sensitive scales, the snake would have felt her heartbeat come to a standstill and pull its fangs out of Farita's head, but only for a moment, just long enough to dislocate its jaws and begin the painstakingly slow process of swallowing the woman whole. For at least an hour, it worked Farita inside of it, inch by inch. When it was done, it would have laid there for a few more hours yet. Its belly was so distended that it could barely move, and if it overexerted itself, it would involuntarily regurgitate its hard-won meal. But the sudden bustle of feet and cars from people going home from work forced it to slither its weighted body back into the cover of the deeper trees. Farita's husband was beginning to get worried. No matter how much fun she was having, she'd never stay out so long that she wouldn't be in time for dinner or to put their kids to bed. And when the sun started to go down, he walked the route that he knew that Farita would have had to take. He found Farita's box of seeds and her handbag on the ground next to the rock where she'd been sitting. Fearing that she'd been kidnapped, he called the couple's extended family and went out into the streets, knocking on every door and asking if anyone had seen her. They even contacted the client that she went out to see, and he joined in on the search when he found out that she was missing. The police soon joined in, and almost the entire town was out most of the night looking for her. But in the darkness, the people who did a cursory search of the wooded areas with their flashlights missed the snake hiding behind the stump. It wasn't until the next morning, when the search began afresh, that a group of college students went deeper into the overground patches that were too dark to search the night before. It wasn't long until they found the python, now no longer hidden by the cover of darkness. They took one look at the grotesque, swollen belly to know that it had swallowed something. They called the authorities, and between the men and the officers, they decided to cut the snake open right there, without letting Farita's husband know what they'd found. If the serpent had only swallowed a pig or some other large animal, they'd be worrying him unnecessarily. This was a wise decision. Had her family known, they would have rushed to the scene. The sight of her mucus-encrusted body, still wearing her shoes and clothes with half of Farita's face torn off, there's no way that they would have been able to recover from the trauma. The only real comfort that could be taken from the incident is that the dangerous animal was now no longer a threat to anyone else. But it still begs the question, what will be done about the situation? This isn't a bear or a tiger that can be tracked by its footprints, or even one that can be spotted due to how low to the ground they are. In other words, it wasn't the first, and it certainly won't be the last. For now, all we can do is wait for time to tell how many more Indonesians will meet their terrifying final affliction.